One of the first things I'd like to do getting into SignalR is kind of do a brief overview of what SignalR actually is. SignalR is a client and server library that was developed by David Fowler and Damian Edwards that allows you to build real-time multi-user web applications using asynchronous connections in ASP.NET. Or SignalR is your friend in ASP.NET development. Basically, in a nutshell, SignalR pulls off what a lot of us Microsoft developers looking over the fence over at the guys that use Node.js and Socket.io for the real-time event-driven interactivity. We're kind of jealous because for Microsoft developers to build a stock ticker application, that was quite a chore to do in .NET and to make it nice and fast and very lightweight. It's just really hard. So SignalR actually levels the playing field with things like Node.js and other JavaScript library frameworks and brings it into the Microsoft realm. So here's the typical website. You have Joe User right there. He has a client side like we all do. He makes a request and pushes it to the server side. Server side says, okay, I got a request from the client. I better do something. So the server side turns around, sends a request back to the client, and then Joe User is actually happy. The only issue is, well, this is typical website. This is PHP, this is ASP, this is standard HTML, this is a little bit of everything. And this can be done either by full page postback or asynchronously. So nothing really exciting going on here other than your standard way the web works. So let's look at SignalR. So again, here we have Joe User. He has a client side. He makes a request to the server. Server says, okay, I better do something. You made a request. So I send a request back. However, with SignalR, you can also say, hey, here's Tammy User over here. She wants something too. She's got a client side. And the server says, oh yeah, you got a connection to me, so I'm going to send you what Joe User sent to me over to you. Then you have Bob. Bob's also got a connection on the server side. He's got his own client. So the server pushes to him too. So what we're seeing here is that asynchronously the server is pushing out data to client connections that are connected to the server. And this can be singled out like by a group, but mainly the least restrictive way does a broadcast is how SignalR puts it. And this pushes it out to all the awaiting clients that have connections. Also, this is not long polling. One of the ways that sites used to pull this off, or in some cases still do, this kind of idea that it's instantaneous or the server is like really being highly interactive, when all it's really doing is sitting there on a page that's constantly hitting the server like every couple seconds to say, hey, has anything changed? If so, let me know. And this is where you would see, like in the status bar, or sometimes you would see an animated GIF, just kind of keep going and going, or maybe flash a little bit, because that's what it's doing in the background. It's constantly making these requests against the server to see what's going on. So what SignalR kind of does is that it builds kind of like a proxy or a hub between the client side and the server side to allow this two-way communication that makes it seamless. So it's not like an AJAX request where you're just sitting there, hitting every couple seconds, or doing normal polling where you're like reloading a page or something to that effect every so many seconds. It's none of that. It just kind of sits there and goes to and from the client to the server and then back again. Great example of this. Some people say, well, what would be a typical application you'd see? Well, if you've ever used any kind of chat, whether it's on Facebook or some random site, you put data in and then it has to go to the server and then bounce to whoever's on the other end. In this case, we have two users on the right side and our main user on the left side. So you imagine Joe, the user on the left side, types in something. Well, that has to go through his computer to the server and then back out to the clients on the other side. And then obviously most people are familiar with how chat works. Well, the old days, you'd have to pull that. So it would constantly be looking for updates, then notify everybody. Well, what SignalR does, it does that automatically. One person puts in something, you can broadcast it out to everybody or specific groups of people. Like best way to describe that, if you have chat rooms, specific rooms that have a subset of people, that would be kind of the idea of a group. Or if you have people like on your site, you have administrators versus normal users, you can actually decipher different messages to go out for each of those groups. So really, really cool stuff. This is big for Microsoft development and go to change the way we do a lot of our web applications. You know, just like MVC changed the way we're doing a lot of our applications as well. So you're sold now. How do you get started with SignalR? Well, if you're using Visual Studio, you can usually use the NuGet package manager. And it'll update all your JavaScripts, like your jQuery, whatever it needs to. When you use NuGet, they have dependencies in there. So, for instance, if you have a project that has like jQuery like 1.6, and for the sake of argument, say SignalR requires 1.7, 1.8, what have you, it'll automatically update that for you. And it's pretty easy. You just find the package manager console. Should be under Tools in Visual Studio and Package Manager Console. Get that open within Visual Studio. Type in install-package, then a space, and then SignalR, and hit enter, and it'll do the rest of the work for you. This assumes, obviously, you have a web project open. What we're going to be using here shortly will be an MVC4 project, and it will put all the files where they need to be, and it'll bring over minified versions and so forth. So good stuff, and let's get into that. Okay, now we're going to get into Visual Studio and go ahead and create a new project. Here we're going to look at creating an MVC4 project. So let's go ahead and select ASP.NET MVC4 Web Application. This will be very similar if you're using MVC3 or Visual Studio 2010. So here we're going to just say call our project SR. Let's look. Go save it somewhere. Let's go ahead and select that. Give it name SR for SignalR. We'll just go ahead and say OK. And I'm going to choose Internet Application. That will give us some pre-built stuff that comes with MVC. But you can select any of these. It doesn't really matter. The view engine that we're going to use is the Razor view engine. But as you can see, you can select ASPX if you'd like. SignalR being a JavaScript library along with the .NET side of this, whether you choose ASPX or Razor view engine doesn't really make a difference. The code will pretty much work the same in both cases. So for this, we'll just choose Razor and go ahead and say OK. And let Visual Studio do its thing. Right now it's decompressing the MVC4 template. You can see down the bar exactly what it's kind of doing. It's pretty much assembling a lot of JavaScript libraries that come with it. Microsoft's been pretty big about that the past few years of getting all that started. As you can see, it popped up in a home controller that it created for us, as well as created a couple of views to match the controllers. They made an account controller, a home controller, and they have a shared folder that has like our layout, which is our master page, and a couple other things. One main thing to point out is that they have the scripts folder. If you haven't used MVC 3 or 4 yet, they're really pushing down jQuery now, and as well as some other libraries like here's Knockout that Steve Sanderson from Microsoft. It's not a Microsoft product, but it is a kind of a mapper utility that keeps track of some DOM elements in JavaScript, so you don't have to do things. It's really, really cool stuff. And Modernizer, which helps your browsers be backwards compatible. So anyways, as you can see, we've got some default jQuery stuff here, and we need to get our SignalR in here. So like I said in the PowerPoint, you want your package manager console. So that's actually up here under Tools, and you can say Library Package Manager. And normally, oh, it's over here. I was looking on the wrong side. And here it is, so Package Manager Console. And what we want to do is type in install-package Signal R, all one word for Signal R. Go ahead and hit enter when you're ready to go. And depending on how fast your computer is and your internet connection, you will see it go do its work. Essentially what it's doing right now is going out to the internet and contacting NuGet, and you can see it's pulling down all the dependencies, or at least checking them, and then pulling down the Signal R libraries and any dependencies that needed. Starting here at the top, it was checking out to see if Signal R actually existed yet. If it didn't, it made note of that and to pull it down. Also check jQuery here. There's Newtonsoft, which is used in the .NET code, Signal R server-side code, jQuery, and here it removed the old version of Newtonsoft and then added a newer version, and it pretty much did the same thing with the other libraries here. So okay, cool. So we got that installed, and go over here to our scripts, and we're going to refresh that folder. Okay, and here we have our jQuery Signal R. One thing in 2012 Visual Studio, you notice that it actually collapses the associated minified file, which is kind of nice because you don't end up with a duplicate. At least it appears to be duplicates all over this. So it does that. So we got our Signal R here, and being MVC4, routing that we have to deal with is actually in the app start folder, and we'll get to the routing in just a second. But the first thing we want to do is go to our bundles, because we need to make a bundle for our Signal R. I'm going to auto hide this to give us more real estate here. So you can copy any of these, or you can hand type it. I personally just like to copy, and go ahead and paste, and we'll call our script bundle Signal R. So Signal R, and underneath that we are just going to grab our name of Signal R here. There we go. Let's go back to our bundle config, and there we go. So now this is saying go grab anything in jQuery.signalr with the asterisk at the end. So it will know to grab the minified or the full version, depending on if we're debugging or if we're pushing to production. Okay, so we've got Signal R taken care of in our bundle config now. Next thing we want to do is actually go to our master page, which is our layout in the Razor syntax. So double click that, open it up, and you see how up in the head section it's got Modernizer up here as rendering out. That's where that JavaScript library is going to be. But then if you scroll down to the bottom, it has jQuery at the bottom, and then the scripts here that renders out after jQuery is saying, like any custom JavaScript that you load, it's going to load at the page. And they do this so that the page loads faster. People see the page before it's actually done rendering. So if you have large JavaScript sections, those will generally load last. However, there are some kind of inconsistencies between the browsers sometimes, especially with Signal R. So with Signal R, if you know you're going to use it, I actually move the jQuery script rendering up top into the head, even though it will slow down the page, but you'll make up that difference with SignalR, just the way it works. So there will definitely have to be a balance there. So one of the first things we're going to do is do a scripts.render after we moved our jQuery, and go say tilde bundles SignalR, and that's all we actually have to do. That points to our bundle config, which we made in the app start folder here. Take a peek there. That's what we're calling right here. And close that. Okay, so this is all we have to do right now with our layout. That will work for us. So go ahead and close that. Okay. One last thing that we have to do to tell SignalR basically how to behave itself within MVC is actually establish a map connection to our future endpoint, tell it what it needs to do, and we'll kind of stub that out now. And when we get into the persistent connection API, which is next, we will uncomment what we do and go from there. So what we want to do now is go into the root config file, and right before the roots.ignore root, give it a couple spaces here. We want to type in roots.map connection, and we're just going to say my endpoint, and don't worry about the IntelliSense for this right now. I'll say echo, which is the default for SignalR. Basically, it's like equivalent of like a ping, if you will, but this is how it responds. And just say echo / curly brace asterisk operation, and then another curly brace to end it, and double quote. Okay, connection, and up here I want to say using SignalR. Okay, at least some of that will go away. The map connection will go away. So in front of what we just made there, we will go ahead and just comment it out, and we will return to this in the next section for persistent connection API.